And I'm going to go through the supplies that I have, and while you guys are finishing up wetting your canvas, if you haven't already done that. So the reason why we humidify our canvases, if you go to other YouTube channels and watch painting classes, or if you've seen anyone else paint, they don't always do that, but Denver's really dry. And so you use a little bit of water on your canvas, it helps keep your paint from drying out too quickly. Acrylic paint is basically made out of glue, pigment, and unfortunately plastic. That's why it's acrylic. And when it dries really fast. It's not like oil paints that people have been using for thousands of years. It's a pretty new product, you know, decades, not hundreds of years. And it dries in 5 to 10 minutes. It will dry quickly on the canvas and also on your brushes and your clothes. So if you get it on your clothes, let me tell you how to get that out. Hopefully your apron will prevent that from happening. But if you do get any on your clothes or your carpet or your cat, what you want to do is you want to get some clean napkins and then blot it off, pull it off, and then rub a little Dawn dish soap into it. And then if it's closed, put it in the wash as quickly as you can. And warm water does clean better than, hot water does clean acrylic paint off better than cold water. Cold water will sit. If it's on your cat, you're gonna have to give your little kitty a bath. And then also say a prayer, because it doesn't always come out. But yeah, your cat's hair will grow. All right, what else? Okay, so we've got humidity on our canvas, and we are going to work from the inside of this out, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, oh, by the way, you should have the same paint colors that I do. I have white, black, blue, and yellow, and you also have red in your kit. So they're all primary colors, and we can blend whatever colors we need using the primary colors. But this color, you'll notice, doesn't have, this canvas doesn't have any red in it at all. If you want, as an option, since I know Boulder people are creative, so this would be an option. If you wanted, I'm going to go ahead and do the painting just like this is. But when we start doing the yellow, if you don't overlap, do not overlap the blue with the yellow to get green. But instead you wanted to put a red ring in here, overlapping the blue with the red. And then your red can overlap with your yellow. Then you'll get more sunset colors. And that is also really lovely. So let me just rephrase that in a way you can remember it. If you decide you want the sunset colors instead of this, just don't overlap blue and yellow, okay? Just introduce red and then overlap blue and red, okay? And then the red and yellow. All right, so I bet you can figure that out, you're smart folks. But I'm gonna go ahead and teach you this one, okay? So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pick up a big brush, whatever your biggest brush is, and I'm putting paint on both sides. Baseball, about the size of a baseball, maybe a large apple, and plain old white. White on both sides of my brush, on the big brush you have. Plain old white. And I'm just putting it in the middle, kind of like the Japanese flag. I think it does not have a circle right in the middle. So just plain old white, the size of a big apple, orange, or baseball. And I don't even have to clean my brush for the next step. I'm just going to pick up a little bit of yellow. And I'm going to start circling out with my yellow. And this is I love circle paintings because they're very zen-like. And whatever's going on in the world, this helps. This is very calming. just circling out with yellow. It's kind of the opposite of a fried egg. I've got yellow on the outside, white on the inside. And you can pick up the yellow again and just go out a little farther. So now I've got this giant orange. I'm not sure if this is a sunset or a moonrise, but whatever it is in your world, that's what it is in your world. I think it's a moon. So I've got basically a yellow donut or bagel. It looks like a bagel. I think I'm hungry. Normally when we have our classes, we play music, but because of YouTube, they don't want us to play copyrighted music. So since you're muted, if you want to play music in the background, music does help calm you down. There are, and it opens your creative mind. There's some research that shows that there are definite things that help open your creative mind. It gets those creative synapses firing. And I'll just tell you some of those things while you're doing your yellow. Movement. So if you stand up and move around while you paint and go walk away, come back and look at it from a distance and just incorporate some movement into your painting, that opens your creative mind. Music opens your creative mind. Of course, mind-altering substances like alcohol and weed, they open your creative mind as well. I'm not recommending that, but I'm just saying we do serve alcohol here normally, and it helps people relax. What else? So trying to think if there are other things. Movement, music, humor. Our classes, we do try to incorporate a little bit of humor in there, and I'll let you be the judge of that at the end of the class. And yeah, so that's about it. Those are the things I can think of off the top of my head, but do move around, and those things really do help you relax and open your mind, your creative mind. So I'm not going to let this dry. So when you clean your brushes, clean them like crazy in the water. Let the water do the work, okay? This water is going to be going down your sink anyway later. So let the water do all the work, and then bring your brush out of the water, dab it on the side of your container, and then just use your napkins for checking to see if it's clean. That way you use far fewer napkins. So thank you for that comment. I appreciate it. We try not to throw away tons of napkins around here if we can help it.
I also
they should
appreciate
be compostable.
Reference. Oh, sorry, Nancy. I appreciate the Bob Ross reference.
Yeah,
Brian.
So it's really funny you guys say that, because I do teach Bob Ross classes. I'm certified to teach Bob Ross classes. I think I'm the only certified instructor in the country that doesn't use paint thinner. And Bob used a ton of paint thinner, but it has benzene in it. And I really love this group because you guys know that benzene is a class 1 carcinogen. And so we just manually clean our brushes here. And my classes take a little longer for that reason. And people can't believe that I don't use paint thinner, but we make beautiful, beautiful oil paintings here without ever touching paint thinner. And so, yeah.
I love that.
It's fun to know that I'm speaking to a group that actually understands how important that is.
I want to do one of those.
And you can do it. It's easy.
Nancy.
Yeah, I'd love it. I would love it.
Yeah.
Hey, Darla, tell you what, once we get started again, get a free Bob Ross class. That'll be my thank you to you. How's that?
Awesome. Thank you, Nancy. I can't wait. When do we open?
Yeah, no problem. As soon as people keep their masks on and we can get through this pandemic.
Okay. Wear your masks.
All right. Definitely. So I'm not going to leave this so obvious. I'm going to pick up, I clean my brush really well. I'm picking up more white paint, and I'm going to start again in the center, real slow, and I'm going to just real slow, and then I'm just going to circle out, really slow, circle out. And by just going slowly, it's going to make this more gradual. So I get kind of an ombre effect, that I don't get that hard white and a hard yellow circle. And I'm just going to enjoy the movement and just gradually go out. It's almost like I'm mowing a lawn, a round lawn, if you can imagine that. All right, so by taking my brush with white paint and going gradually out, now I have a circle that goes from white to yellow and a little more gradually. It's less like a donut or a wheel. So in regard to Bob Ross beating the devil out of his brushes, so Bob died in 1995, and at the time he was using copious amounts of paint thinner, and he would put his brushes, and I use all certified Bob Ross brushes and canvases and paints and all that stuff, but he would put his brushes in this big bucket of paint thinner, and he would splash it all over, and then he would, after he splashed it, he'd beat the dickens out of it and would fly all over the TV studio and his studio in New Smyrna Beach, Florida. And then he would actually wipe it on his pant legs. And so, you know, a lot of the artists that still paint in his style down in New Smyrna Beach, where they train people to teach Bob Ross classes, they still use the paint thinner, and I do when I go down there. It's not a big deal. I'm just a lot more careful with it because Bob did die of cancer. His wife also died of cancer. There's no saying for sure that that had anything to do with it. But if you do paint, just kind of keep that in mind, like, you know, have a healthy respect for benzene. I had this guy take a Bob Ross class with me, and he was he was a plane mechanic, a jet mechanic. And he said he had never heard that about paint thinner, that benzene was bad for you. And he said they would have big vats of it, and they would dip the plane parts in it and then pull them out, and they would splash all over. And he said, I'm got my hands up to my elbows in paint thinner all the time, which I thought, OSHA might want to know about that. So if you want to, after you've done that, if you want to, you know, brighten up your white, you can, but we can also do that later, you know, by just putting a little more white in there. We're going to be actually doing the opposite technique from the outside with the blue. And then we could always come back and fix this if you want. Now, let me just tell you a little bit about blue paint. So at our studio, we have about 10 different colors of blue paint. We also have, well, there's several colors of every color, basically. In your kit, you have ultramarine blue. We have about 500 different paintings that we teach here. This particular painting may have used phthalo blue. It's a little bit darker and more like blue jeans. It's a cooler blue. And so if your blue doesn't look exactly like my blue or like the sample, don't worry about it, okay? It's still gonna be great. It's still gonna mix to make the green around the sun. It's just that there are lots of different recipes for making blue. There's cobalt blue, there's ultramarine blue, there's phthalo blue, cerulean blue. I'm sure there are others. So just know that primary blue, if your paints will dry in about, 10 minutes, and maybe if your plate's sitting around like mine was for about a half hour, it will start to get a little thick like peanut butter. And when that happens, just mix a few drops of water in it and stir it really good with your brush, with a clean brush. All right, so we're gonna start from the corners actually, and we are going to mimic the curve of this circle with our blue. And I'm going to do it on all four corners. I might need to set my my canvas a little forward or hold it near the bottom to make sure I can get that bottom all the way down. So I'm basically creating a frame around this painting in blue by rounding the corners. Now, before I get to my fourth corner, I'm going to take advantage of the fact that's a clean corner, and I'm going to come around and I'm going to paint the sides of the painting blue as well, and the top and the bottom. And the reason I do that is that if you paint the sides and the top and the bottom, that's called a gallery wrap. And then you won't have to put it in a frame. So you'll save money and resources and not need a frame. It'll look great on your wall. We have a teacher here who always says, so take down your diplomas and your family portrait and your awards, and then just you'll have this on your wall instead. Hopefully your family won't mind. Okay, so by doing that, holding it up before I did the last corner, it's easy for me to get the tops, the sides, and the bottom as well. And I promise we are going to have a break after the background when we let this dry, okay? But we're going to get the background on first. So notice how I'm just staying away from that yellow while it's drying a little bit. Just kind of creeping up to it. And you can go right up to your yellow with your blue. So what I'm going to do now to blend is I'm just going to go, I clean my brush really well, and I'm picking up yellow paint. This is for everyone except for Darla. And then I'm just going to go around that yellow, and I'm going to let it mix with the blue. And it is creating green. And I'm just going to take that out as far as you want. Well, this far. You know what? This makes more sense, right? There we go. That makes more sense. Okay. So I'm just taking that yellow and I'm going out around the yellow so it's overlapping with the blue, and now it's blending with the green. Blending with the blue. I'm not taking it out all the way to the corners though, and I'll show you why in a minute. We want the corners to continue to be blue. All right. So where the yellow goes over the blue, it's now made green. And in Darla's case, she would be using red to do this step, but we're using yellow. And we're gonna just go shy of those 4 corners, but staying with this circular motion. And letting that yellow overlap with the green. So on my painting, this area is pretty dry. This area is medium. It's starting to dry. I can see some wet streaks in it. And then this yellow overlapping with the blue is pretty wet. And I'll tell you how you know if your painting is wet or dry. If you touch it, that's one way, but we don't want to mess it up, right? So if you see any streaks in it that are shiny, that tells you it's dry. Also, when you turn over your canvas, whether you're painting with acrylic paint on a canvas or watercolor on paper, it's always going to be cooler to the touch where it's wet. So this is dry, it's a little warmer. This area is wet, it's a little cooler. A third way of doing it is to pick it up and rub it on the person next to you, but I don't recommend that way because they will scream. And if that person is someone you live with during COVID, it's going to be a long winter. So I would not recommend that way. By the way, these paint kits that you guys are using, we sell these for 20 bucks at the studio, and we're going to have them as long as this pandemic lasts. We have ornament kits, we have face mask kits, and we have canvas kits. They're all 20 bucks, and I'm here every day making these silly kits. So if you want to do a family party or, you know, paint along to our Zoom classes on YouTube, we're here. We're not going anywhere. So we have this yellow, we have the blue, we have this overlapping green area, the last step of the background, and then I'll let you guys just scoop around for a bit. I clean my brush really well. I'm going to pick up more white paint, okay? And then I'm going to go back in and make that baseball again. There's my baseball. But now I'm not going to stop there after the white. I'm just going to slowly just relax and enjoy the movement of it. And I'm going to circle out, letting the white paint just dissipate and create little rings in the light. And as it picks up maybe a little bit of the wet yellow, it's going to carry that out more into the blue. And hopefully all of this is going to start to look a little smoother and more gradual. So hopefully what we're going for are light rings that start white, go yellow, and then go into the blue. And sometimes if you ever go to like 16th Street Mall or Larimer Square and it's cold outside, you'll see, or wet, you'll see light rings around the lampposts, and that's what we're trying to create here. I'm going to clean my brush. And then I can just go over this one more time, starting at the outside of the baseball, and just kind of smooth it. Make sure your brush is really clean though. Obviously mine was not clean enough because I just had a green drip. So maybe clean it a little better than I just did. And that water will help these colors blend and create those light rings. So it's painting with water when you get out here. I noticed there's a little more green on the interior of this one. If you want, if you like that better, have water on your brush and then just use a tiny bit of blue. So it's like half water and half blue paint. And you can also circle in from where your green starts, but go slow, take it easy. You don't want to overdo it. You still want that moon to look yellow. But basically, that's how you blend paint. If you go on to, YouTube or some virtual classes, they'll say, oh, you can't blend with acrylic paint. You can only blend with oils. Baloney. You can blend with acrylic paint, but it's practice. It's all about knowing when your paint is dry or wet or partially dry, and then practice. But you can blend. It's just a little bit trickier with acrylics. But that's exactly what we're doing. We're blending it by just overlapping colors in various stages of drying. All right. So just by having a tiny bit of wet, watery blue on my brush, just the teeny tiniest amount, I was able to bring that ring in a little bit closer to the moon. This background is the biggest part of the painting, obviously. And we're almost done with our background. We just have one more easy step. So I want to darken the colors. And the reason I want to darken the colors is anytime you have a focal point, you want your viewer to really look at the focal point, you need to darken or simplify the edges so it brings your eye to your focal point. Bob Ross does that all the time, or did when he was alive. So what I'm going to do is I mix a little bit of blue with a little bit of black. And I'm just going to go in these corners. Oh, that's really dark. That's too much black. Maybe do like 3/4 blue and 1/4 black. I overdid my black a little bit. So I'm going to clean my brush and tone that down a bit. But anyway, just darken your corners in that same curve with some very dark blue. It's blue that has a little black in it. I'll rinse my brush. If you use too dark, you can always just thin it with water and make it go farther that way. But anyway, so notice how I'm just darkening the colors with some very, very dark blue in the corners. And it just works to bring my eye into the center of the painting. And you can carry that over to the sides if you want, the top and the sides right next to it. Make it consistent. But that just brings the dark sky in a little bit, but I still want it to not have hard lines where it stops. So that's why I picked up brush on my water, and I'm using just water to kind of blend together where that dark, dark blue starts and stops. So as it goes out to the corners, it's darker, because that's where I put the paint. And then the second time I just use water and bringing it in so it blends. So that's the darkest part in the far corner. And then I use water on my brush, just a couple drops of water, and then bringing it in a little bit to blend it. And that brings my eyes to my focal point. So at this point, we're going to let this dry, but I like to tell this story. When I go down to the Bob Ross studio in New Smyrna Beach, Florida, because I'm Bob Ross certified, I like to go down once a year and paint with the other instructors down there for a week. Yeah, when things are good, it's a write-off too, which is awesome.
Yeah.
It's right on the beach. It's about an hour outside of Daytona, kind of a little artist community, and part artist community, part retirees. And anyway, so when I go down there and paint with the Bob Ross folks, I get to see his originals. And Darla's heard this before, but at the studio down there, they have his, not all of his originals, but they have some of his originals, and they'll have 3 of one painting, and you can see the 3 that he would do for his show. And so when he was doing his show, he would paint one painting off of a photo that he took in Alaska or wherever, or a postcard or something, or some idea that he had, and he would take it to his producer, he'd show it to his producer, and his producer would say, oh, okay, that's fine. And then he would come in before the show and he would paint a second copy of it. And then on the show, he would paint a 3rd copy. And of course, he was such a great showman that he would go in and pretend he was making it up as he went along. He'd be like, oh, I think today I'll paint a mountain. But
Does
he really
Bob Ross have any Colorado paintings that he's like thought up and painted that are based on Colorado?
You know, that's a great question. I have not seen him say that on a show. He painted beaches and mountains the most. And I'll tell you why. So he grew up in Daytona Beach, Florida. And so he loved the beach. His studio was on the beach or near the beach, 2 blocks from the beach. But then he was in the military. And so he was, believe it or not, he was a drill sergeant. And so he was stationed in Anchorage, Alaska. And so he had never seen snow before. And he got on a plane, went to Alaska, and came off the plane, fell on his butt on the ice. And that was his introduction to snow and cold and ice. His beach kid. And he just fell in love with Alaska. And so he took a lot of pictures of it. And he used to watch Bill Alexander on Bill Alexander had a similar show to his on UPS, but Bill was this old, kind of gruff German guy. And so he had a totally different personality than Bob. And Bob was a drill sergeant during the day, as I said. So he would go home and kick back and paint to Bill's show.
Alexander seemed very slow, right? He was like, he would go off and he would just like talk about things. And I don't know, he was an interesting man, wasn't he?
Well, I didn't know him personally. I have to say, I didn't know him personally. When I went down and got trained.
You know Bob Ross personally?
No. I just said I didn't.
Bob Ross.
When I went down and got trained, it was after he died. And so his friends and the people that he worked with when he taught are still down there. And so I've met people who knew him who told me about him. But no, I didn't know him personally because I just got trained, I don't know, not that long ago, in the last 10 years. And then he died in 95. But his studio's still down there and people are still teaching other people how to paint in his technique. There are about 2,000 people who have been trained to teach Bob Ross since 1985, around there. And the first ones were his son and his friends and family members, and then it expanded out. And most of those people are retired now. It was kind of a common thing for retirees to go down there. It was on their bucket list. And so it's kind of hard to find a Bob Ross instructor. There's a few of us in Colorado. And every now and then his son actually comes through and teaches paintings too. He was scheduled to teach a lot last spring, but they all got canceled because of COVID. But maybe his son will come around again. But I was going to say, anyway, when you have those 3 paintings that he would do for each show next to each other, they wouldn't look the same. And so the reason for that is that even when you're using the same inspiration photo or the same composition, inspiration, your personality, how much sleep you had the night before, what's on your mind, all those things show up in your painting. Bob used to say, don't paint angry or you'll have an angry little painting. But you know what? He also would say every day's a good day to paint. And I totally believe that if you paint, it'll change your day. All right, so I'm going to tell you about trees for a second, about happy trees. Bob Ross actually copyrighted happy trees, happy little trees. This is a happy tree. It's not a Bob Ross happy little tree, but it's a happy tree. So what I want you to notice is these roots, they go all the way across. So that's the first thing I want you to notice. The base is wide here, and then it gets thinner as it goes up. So on all trees, they're wider at the base and they get thinner as they go up, so that, oops, so that the tree can stand up. That makes sense, right? Bob Ross called it foots. The trees need foots. And so this tree is very stylized. Most branches don't really curl like this, but it kind of makes it cool and creepy at the same time. It's kind of like, I'm trying to think of what that, there's a...
The Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for reading my mind. Yes, like one of his movies. Absolutely, thank you. But if you want to do straight branches, you can do that. But these are stylized for sure. And then notice also it's not just like a straight trunk and then a V coming off it. We don't want it to look like a chicken foot or a snowman foot. We're gonna have the tree come up and then, you know, it'll grow and then a branch come off and then it'll grow some more, another branch come off, grow some more, another branch come off. So it looks more natural, okay? All right. The other thing to notice is that the trunk is always the widest part. The main branch will be the next widest. And then as it goes out, they get thinner and thinner. And then we want to end in a point on each branch. And I'm going to show you how to do that. Sound good? Cool, cool. So first, for starters, I'm going to go across, I'm going to take a medium brush. So that big brush, it's worked hard so far. Now we're going to let it soak in the hot tub. And I'm going to start down here about an inch from the bottom left-hand corner. And I'm going to use my black paint to paint a line. And this is gradually and bumpy go up to form the left side of that tree trunk. And then it's going to turn into a branch. Now, if yours isn't perfect, who cares? No one is ever going to see your original, the original. They're only going to see yours. They're going to think you are a genius. So it's almost like a hook. But down here, make it bumpy. Bumpy, bumpy, bumpy. And then I'm going to fill in underneath. This is the ground and the root coming out of the ground before it starts to become a tree. And yeah, we worked hard over here, but too bad. Now we're covering it. I'm going to go up about 2 inches on the right, and I'm going to form the other side of that trunk. And that's going to become a branch over to the right. And we don't really know where that tree starts and where the tree roots start and where the ground stops, or vice versa, and that's okay. The conservationists among you will recognize that as everything's connected, right? I think you guys are my favorite group because you're conservationists. All right, so the tree is a couple inches thick here. You have smaller canvases than I do. So, you know, if it's an inch thick, that's fine. Mine's a couple inches thick. And then this branch comes off to the right. And this one is really, really a major, major branch. So it's got to be fairly thick. I'm just going over it, especially more at the base where it would naturally be wider. And yes, my paint does run out here. So it is Ving. 2 roads diverged into a tree, right? Something like that. 2 branches, whatever. So to get this I'm gonna make this come down a little bit more, wrap around down here, and I'm gonna chisel my medium brush a little bit. I put paint on both sides, and I'm chiseling it on the side of the brush just so I can make sure the paint is really between all the branches, but no big blobs, and I can get a nice flat edge. If you don't have a medium brush that's flat, use a round one that's a little smaller than what we've been using. All right, so I'm going to go around and I'm going to pull this down to follow that curve. And if the curve or the original curve didn't, just let it end. And notice this goes almost all the way down. That's the end of that crazy branch. So this is my big main trunk, right? So it's going to be widest near where the separates from the main trunk. The main branch separates from the main trunk. And it gets thinner as it goes down until it ends in a point. I'm still using a medium brush at this point, but when we get to the smaller branches, I'll use a smaller brush. So if you've done that, and when you've done that, actually this tree looks a little fatter than mine. So I can, I can always tweak it. So once you've got that on, then we're just going to pull up from the main trunk and make one that goes straight up. It's not the main branch, so it won't be quite as wide as this one. But you know what? It doesn't really matter a lot, so don't worry about it. Another thinner one coming out of there. Those are my main branches. It almost reminds me of an okay. It's all okay. We're going to be okay. It's a little hard to tell without the highlights, so you might want to look at that one. It was really cute when we painted the original of this painting. Like I said, we have about 500 different ones in the studio. Some little kid came up and said, "Oh, that's so cute." I said, "Okay, you get to name it. What do you want to name it?" And she said, "Snow Lights." So I always smile when I see this painting. Remember that cute little kid? All right, I'll go ahead and give you a little more instruction before we get to play again. So I'm going to switch to a smaller brush when I do the Curlicue Branches. And you can look at this one as a reference on exactly where they are, but they don't have to be perfect, like perfectly where these are. But I just want to give you the general idea. Always start in your trunk. Always start in your trunk and then go out. And the reason you do that is because it's depositing more paint when you first touch it. And then if you do that in the trunk, then you can be rest assured that your branches are going to be widest at the beginning and then get thinner as they go out. Because that would make sense for a tree, right? They'd be widest where they touch the trunk and then thinner as they go out. And then I'm also lightening up on my touch as I do it. So I get that little curlicue at the end that is just a light touch. It's almost like I'm brushing hair, curly hair. Just go with the flow, literally, the flow of the paint. Do a little circle. I mean, a little little curlicue, but start in the trunk, start in the trunk. And then just go for a nice smooth curve. If your paint's a little thick, and mine's starting to get thick, it's hard to do things smooth. So I'm going to add a few drops of water to my paint. And if it's more like ink, it's going to be easier to do these smaller branches. The consistency that works really well that I found is the consistency of syrup. When you're doing detail work, syrup works really well. If it's like peanut butter, it's going to be really hard to work with. So thin it out a bit, and then it'll flow off your brush. Now, if I start inside and then go back to the tree, I run the risk of depositing more paint out in the air, out in the sky, and I don't want that. So that's why I'm always going to remember, start in the tree trunk and then go out. In the tree trunk and go out. And that way I'm going to get the right amount of paint for delicate curls. Sounds like a hair salon class. All right. And I'm just kind of doing these all over where I have room. Go with the way the tree grows. So I'm growing up with the tree and then out. Let's see. And then I am going to have some more branches coming off up here. And they are like eyelashes. Start in the trunk and go out. And probably, if I can imagine, they probably curl up here, right? I have to use my imagination on that one. This one seems to have another one coming off it. Basically, those are just the starts of curls. And now I have room on my canvas, I can make some more curls. This is for that Tim Burton stylized look. If you wanted to do the real looking branches, do those. But always remember that trees are never straight in nature. So if you're doing more realistic branches, not these Tim Burton looking ones, then make them wiggly and jagged and they'll look more natural. I'm going to assume you're doing these stylized Tim Burton ones. If I don't hear you need help with something special. All right, so I'm just continuing along with these curls. But come from the direction that the trunk would naturally grow. And mine's not going to look exactly like the original, and neither will yours, and that's great. That's what we want. There's a very deliberate way to do highlights that makes sense. So do let it dry and then do them with me if you will. But if you are finished with your tree, what you could do if you wanted is you could clean one of your small brushes, clean it really, really well so there's no black on it. I just can't swish enough to get it clean at this point. All right, make sure it's nice and clean. And you could start doing this. You could go into your white paint and start doing snowflakes, but leave the black alone. These are either snowflakes or stars or both. I'm not quite sure what they are, but we're going to be putting those on. I'm going to do it in between or around the black tree and not on it because my black tree is still wet. make sure your detail brush is nice and clean before you do this. I'm just making little circles. And I would try real hard not to make them equidistant, make them random. So that's one way, is with a detail brush, but let me show you another way that's even faster. And that's take your biggest brush and clean it really well. I always clean my brushes well. And then dip the handle in white. And then use that, just turn it. And use the handle as a way to make stars and snowflakes. Pretty cool. That's a lot easier. And feel free, if you want to unmute, feel free.
Careful what you ask for.
I'm concentrating so hard. I don't know if I can talk and paint.
And these white stars or snowflakes, they're going all over. Any place that's dry, you can put them on. But remember what I said about how to tell if it's dry. If it's shiny, just wait. And to make them round, you'll notice that I'm just spinning my brush, the end of my brush, and it just makes them round. But don't put it over white paint, wet paint, okay? How many of you will never look at a pizza box the same?
I reused mine from my last party.
Nice.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that you have provided us business as a locally owned small business that's woman owned, and my husband helps me here, but it's mostly me. And as soon as I get back to business as normal, I'm going to try to hire back a bunch of local artists like we had before. And I really appreciate you supporting our business so that we can do that. We also do a ton of fundraisers. We've done some pro bono work. We've had, by the way, put on as many or as few dots as you want. I'm going to town here, obviously. But if that's too much for you, you know how many to put on yours. We're going to put snow inside the branches in just a minute, as soon as we're done with the dots. But I was going to say, we're in Southeast Denver, and we give a lot of gift certificates to schools all over the metro area. We've done free classes for school shooting survivors and immigrants who have had just some horrendous experiences. I don't know, a bunch of different groups. And I don't know the numbers off the top of my head for recent years. I know in 2017, we gave away, between our fundraisers that raised cash and the gift certificates, we gave away about $50,000. And we're able to do that because we have such a wonderful community that supports us here. And I love the fundraisers. I meet the coolest people. There's so many great people in Metro Denver, and it just really reminds me of how awesome Colorado is. There's so many wonderful nonprofits doing so many awesome things. It's really a privilege. I love it. And you know who else has been here? We've had a lot of people. I'm kind of interested in politics. I think I started off saying Darla should run. But we've had a lot of people from the state legislature here. Governor Polis has been here. He didn't paint, but he came in and visited with us here once. And it's cool. We've had great support from the community. Wonderful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that it's dry in any part before I do this, but I only want to put the snow where it would make sense, right? So when the snow is falling from the side, from the top, or, you know, at an angle from the either up here, it's going to gather in the places between the branches. So we want the snow to be logical. It's going to gather in these crevices between the branches, right? And on top of the branches. That's why I'm not going to put snow below the branches. I'm going to think about where would the snow fall and where would it stick. So it's going to stick between the branches. It's going to kind of burrow in there. And then on anything that's horizontal, it's going to stick around. Does that make sense? So that's just the part I wanted to show you. I've had people paint this painting and then they put snow on both sides and it just doesn't make any sense. So put it in the crevices and where it would stick. So it would stick on top of this branch. It would stick on top of this one and in this curl. It would stick down in this curl.
Which brush are you using?
Thank you for asking. I'm using white paint on the smallest brush I have, on a detail brush. Depending on how small your brushes are, it could either be the smallest or next to it. Just it's a pretty small brush. White paint. And I'm putting it on top, meaning closer to the sky, not right on top of the black. There's a couple ways I could mean on top, and I mean literally over the branch, like above it, above it. Any place snow would gather or stick naturally. And it might not be able to get in that little crevice too well, so I'll just put it kind of light in there, but it would definitely be heavier here. And then it would be heavy, it would stick here too. And it would stick on top of these curlicues. So basically, it's on the tops of things. I mentioned that Governor Polis has been here. I've been worried his partner is in the hospital with COVID. Hope he does okay. No, be sure to put some snow down here as well. It's gonna kind of accumulate near the tree trunk and it's gonna be bumpy. Woohoo! Little moguls down here. Fun, all right. And then there's also just some random kind of elliptical snow globs down here or hills.
Hey, Nancy, I had a question,
Sure.
but you got to painting on the ground before. So I'm kind of going more naturalistic, and I was curious about if you were to look at the ground and you would see the snow being reflected, the moonlight or whatever, the sun, but it wasn't really very bright and stand out as you have it. I guess the contrast, you'd be a lot less of a contrast. How would you do that? Does that make sense?
Well,
And especially like
colors, your colors would just be more subdued. I mean, that's the easy answer.
it's like maybe make them more of a gray.
Yeah, yes. So for example, if I'm not going to do this because it's not part of this
Sure.
painting, but
Mhm.
let's say, for example, the sun was right behind this tree and it wasn't this big, giant, you know, magnificent display here. It was just kind of coming from behind the tree. In order to paint the light behind the tree, and don't do this, guys, I'm just answering this question. I would mix black and white to make gray and just outline the tree. And one thing about light, light actually bends. I don't know if you knew that, but it's a scientific fact that light actually bends a tiny bit and it will highlight both sides of a tree because it slightly bends and creates an outline that's lighter than the main part of whatever it is the light is behind.
So would you do that with a really thin brush? Just
Yes.
paint on either
Yes.
side?
Correct. Yeah, this is a very stylized, exaggerated painting. Like we said, and kind of in the style of Tim Burton, which is fun, right?
Mhm.
It's not supposed to look real. It's supposed to be happy and a little nuts, right? Like Tim Burton. It's not, I mean, you know, I didn't paint this to be like Tim Burton. I can't say this is a Tim Burton painting. It's just kind of that style.
Mhm.
So if you don't, you know, it's really graphic and graphic things show up really well on the internet, but realistic things, you know, wouldn't have this much contrast. This is very exaggerated, deliberately. All right, so that's my last instruction. If anyone wants to stick around, I'll go to chat. I'm happy to answer any further questions, but I want to thank you so much for supporting a local family-owned business, one that cares deeply about the community. Hopefully they all do, but I know ours does. And when we do come back in the spring and we hire new artists, we'll be doing that at the, well, anyway, there's changes coming down the pike in Denver, because I'm in the city of Denver. But even even the interns that we get will be paid fairly. That's the point. We believe in that. We employ artists and we try real hard to pay them fairly. So anyway, yeah, that's it. That's it for me. Thank you so much for painting with me.